2025 budget. Thanks for that. The request from the GAO, the Government Publishing Office. Hey, did I miss something on that? I'm so old, it was the printing office, but I guess we're getting more modern now. You're publishing?
In 2014, they changed the name.
Okay, so I'm right up to date on that. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. That will conclude your presentation. And last but not least, the Congressional Budget Office. For those of you who are attending via digital media or streaming or whatever, our colleague from Virginia will be using for if she's got questions or whatever, an assistive device. So if it doesn't sound like Ms. Wexton, it is Ms. Wexton. But anyhow, we're not trying to do the bait and switch thing on you for that sort of stuff. I want to thank the witnesses for being here, even though you may not feel like you've been thanked so far. And we'll recognize the ranking member when he arrives. So now, Mr. Comptroller General, Mr. Dodaro, the floor is yours. Please present.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, members of the committee. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about GAO's fiscal year 2025 request. I first want to thank the subcommittee for their past support. I believe we provided a good return on investment as a result of implementation of our recommendations. Last year, over $70 billion in financial benefits accrued to the government. Over the last 6 years, our return on investment has been $133 for every dollar that you provide us. And so we're very proud of that record, and I appreciate your support. The demand for our services remains high. We get about 650 to 700 requests from Congress each year from 93% of the standing committees of the Congress, so it's a very wide footprint across the Congress. We also, this year so far, provided 430 technical assistance to 215 committees, members, and offices. So the outreach that we've had on technical assistance has helped a lot in that area as well. Where our request for this year is basically to maintain the GAO workforce at its existing level of 3,600 full-time equivalent positions. We've added the support that you've allowed us to in the past. This is just to maintain that work. And we're going to continue to focus on 5 major areas that we built up our capacity thanks to your support over the past few years. One is national security issues. There are 115 mandates in the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act for GAO. We do everything from military readiness to weapons system procurement on some of the major weapon systems, the modernization of the nuclear weapons complex. We're tracking aid to Ukraine, both military and foreign assistance as well. So a lot of work, and how our troops are treated. We had a big report this year about the poor conditions in the barracks and the need to really reform that and support that's given not only to the military members but to their families as well. Second is fraud. Fraud is a big problem in the federal government. It's pervasive. We estimated that in the unemployment insurance program alone during the pandemic, it was $100 billion to $135 billion in fraud in that area. Next week, we're going to come out with a government-wide estimate on fraud. We're trying to work to get agencies to prevent fraud in the first place, which is the only effective way. So we have a work program that we'd like to institute with your support going forward. The next area is the science and technology area. We've tripled the size of our work in the science and technology arena. We brought in some top-notch scientists and a wide variety of disciplines. We've done over 30 technology assessments. We're doing much more work on artificial intelligence, quantum computing, regenerative medicine, and across the board in a number of areas in those areas and providing support to the committee. The fourth area is healthcare. Healthcare costs are the fastest growing component of the federal budget, save maybe interest on the debt, but also Medicare, Medicaid, the assistance provided to VA, DOD, the Indian Health Service is a big focus of our efforts because it's now 29% of the federal budget is healthcare costs. And lastly, cybersecurity. You know, I designated that a high-risk area in 1997 across the federal government, critical infrastructure protection 2003. In the last 4 years, we've made over 1,400 recommendations. 670 are still open. The federal government's still not operating at a commensurate with the grave evolving threat in cybersecurity. So we're looking at the National Cybersecurity Strategy, how we're interacting with the private sector on the 16 critical infrastructures across the country, electricity grid, telecommunications, and the financial services, and it goes across the board. This is a big vulnerability, and the federal government really doesn't have a good clue of exactly how vulnerable things are in these critical infrastructure areas that can impact government as well as our economy. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning to talk to you about our requests and the work we're done at GAO, and I'd be happy to respond to questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, General. Appreciate that. The chair now recognizes the ranking member from the home of the Ulysses S. Grant tomb. Mr. Espaillat, the floor is yours for your opening statement. And since we're going to go ahead and fully utilize you, then when you're done, you got first crack at General Dodaro for questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse the lateness. Mr. Dorado, Swagel, and Mr. Harper, thank you all for being here today. Each of your agencies has a tremendous responsibility and provides crucial functions to our democracy. The Government Accountability Office provides independent oversight, obviously, of government programs and activities and nonpartisan support to Congress here. The GAO has been voted the best place to work in government. I got to see that smile on your face.
3 straight years.
3 straight years, for the past 3 years, that's correct. The GAO budget request for fiscal year 2025 is $916 million, or 12.8% above the fiscal year 2024 enacted total. The Congressional Budget Office provides regular support to the Appropriations Committee through technical assistance and cost estimates throughout the annual legislative process. The CBO budget request for fiscal year 2025 is $73.5 million, or 5% above the fiscal year 2024 enacted total. The CBO has been particularly important recently, and we have witnessed budget cuts perpetrated even after handshake agreement. And there are 2 ways to achieve budget cuts, either through decreased vital programs for the low to middle class families, or to ensure that everyone is paying their fair share of taxes. I choose the latter. I prefer that everyone pays their fair share of taxes so that nurses and teachers aren't paying more taxes than a billionaire CEO. There is a larger conversation to be had about that, obviously. However, moving on, the Government Publishing Office fundamentals functions are to make information about the operations of government, particularly the Congress, readily available to the public. The GPO budget request for fiscal year 2025 is $136 million, or 3.1% above the fiscal year 2024 enacted total. This subcommittee greatly appreciates each agency's work, and I would like to commend each of you and your staff for your work in reinforcing Congress' constitutional power of the purse and for dedicating the resources necessary to support this committee. As ranking member, I am committed to ensure that your agencies have the resources they need to build on your excellent records, to provide timely expert assistance to Congress, and to meet the challenges of your missions. I look forward to each of you having a very interesting testimony. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Also, we will continue to leave the floor with you for any questions you have of General Dodaro.
at the request of Congress, GAO conducted a large body of work on the events of January 6th. What were your most concerning findings, and have the law enforcement and intelligence agencies been responsive in addressing your recommendations?
Yes. Our findings were that a number of agencies, FBI, DHS, and including the Capitol Hill Police, had information but didn't process it so that it got into their threat assessments, and it wasn't communicated effectively among the community. So we made a number of recommendations in this regard to better process the information that they get from tips and other intelligence gathering sources, get it into their threat products that are shared, and have better sharing in place. Now, we made a number of recommendations to the Capitol Police and the Capitol Police Board, and I was concerned last year that they were slow in implementing it. So I reached out, I met with talked to the chief, talked to the Sergeant at Arms in the House and Senate, and I'm pleased to report all but one recommendation is implemented so far. What we had them do was to provide more updated policies and procedures for when do you go outside the Capitol complex for support to bring it in, to help bolster the Capitol Police, how they share information among one another, and to give training, particularly to the Capitol Police officers. That one's the one outstanding. They're going to start with their civil, group, the Civil Disturbance Unit, to start with that. And then, but we recommend they give training to everybody if they have to bring in additional people. So, progress has been made in those areas, Congressman Espelot.
We'll have some follow-up questions for the Capitol Police during the hearing. Okay, thank you for your answer.
Sure.
Mr. Swagel? Yes. The CBO.
Excuse me, Congressman Espaillat, we've just completed the testimony of the Controller General. We haven't had Mr. Swagel or the other folks testify yet, but we'll give you a crack at those folks then.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to have them all testify so then someone can just ask you, or just a suggestion?
I'll take it under advisement. Thank you for that. Mr. Clegg, the floor is yours. Do you have any questions for the Controller General?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning. You mentioned that one recommendation had not been completed?
Yes.
What recommendation was that?
That was to provide better training to the Capitol Police workforce and how to handle civil disturbances.
Oh, okay.
And in that one, what they're doing is they're prioritizing giving the training to their civil disturbance unit.
But not all of them?
Not all of them yet. I'm hopeful, I've talked to the chief, I'm hopeful they'll provide it to everybody as soon as they are able to do so.
Okay, all right.
And then we'll consider that fully closed. But I'm very pleased. Other than that, I had very good conversations with the House Sergeant at Arms, Senate Sergeant of Arms that comprise the police board, along with the chief, and they've been very responsive.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Gentleman from Illinois, the floor is yours for Controller General questions.
During the budget cuts and sequestration, you've lost about 10% of the workforce, is that right?
Yeah, there's about 12%. I'm very happy. We were one of the few federal agencies to accommodate that through attrition and other means, and we didn't really have to furlough or RIF anybody during that period of time. And I'm pleased about that, but it set us back. And since then, we've been trying to rebuild.
And you closed the gap in different ways, technology, is it
Yes,
technology gap as well, is
Yeah.
it still an issue?
Yeah, no, we're doing much better on technology, thanks to recent support from the committee. But I did postpone a lot of things. I prioritized our
What's your
people.
priority on technology that would help you?
Right now, we're moving to the cloud technology, and we've moved a lot of applications. We're going to move some of our major other applications with the support of the committee to provide, more flexibility and having more modern options once you're in the cloud to be able to do things, and also to protect computer security. We collect information throughout the government, and of all types, and we need to protect it properly. So moving to the cloud and computer security, and then we're moving all our publications to HTML format, so they're more easily searchable than the PDF formats. So those are our two areas of technology that we're trying to catch up, modernize.
Thank you. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Oklahoma, Ms. Bice.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer, for being here this morning. I just wanted to maybe touch on two quick things. First of all, can you talk a little bit about the New Blue project?
Yeah.
I know that there's been some conversations. It's been a little slow and a little over budget. So can you give some color to that?
Yeah. Well, we've been careful with the project. You know, we look at a lot of IT modernizations across the government, and I want to make sure we piloted it and tested it before we rolled it out, and I didn't want it to be premature. We're pretty much done with the pilots now. We expect by the end of this fiscal year, all GAO products will be in the HTML concept, and then we'll have realized the first potential of that New Blue project. So I'm very pleased with that. We're on the threshold of having it implemented across all our products.
What do you think the delays, why were there delays with trying to get this implemented?
Yeah, well, some of the problems were, first, understanding, make sure we were clear on what our requirements were going to be for the testimony. I've seen a lot of agencies move forward too fast without setting requirements. So we made sure that we spent time to set the requirements properly. And then, of course, in any software development initiative, you're going to have, challenges to get it implemented properly. And but that's why I didn't want to rush it. I've seen a lot of people be more schedule-driven across government than be prepared properly. You continue to see problems in the government with this. The latest problem was with the FAFSA situation, education. They rushed it out. They weren't done. Healthcare.gov, same thing. So I tried to be, so we piloted it, make sure it worked properly before we went full bore. So we're on the threshold of doing that, and I feel good about it.
Thank you for that update. I second your comments about, making sure that we're doing things, I think, properly. There's also a balance, though, from a tech perspective in making sure that you can execute, because what ends up happening is we bid something out, excuse me, we take 3 or 4 or 5 years for implementation, and by the time we actually implement it, that product is almost obsolete. Excuse me.
Yeah, we're okay in that regard.
Okay.
But it's a good point that you make.
And then the follow-up, I think this is to Mr. Clyde's comment. Is there a reason why Capitol Police have said they haven't been able to implement that final recommendation, the training piece of that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that. It could have to do with the resources necessary and the time to provide the training to the people. I'll follow up with the chief. I haven't talked to him recently to see. But what the report I got back from our team that's been following up on these things is that they just wanted to prioritize that unit first. And I can't argue with that. I mean, that's the frontline unit that they need to deal with. It might have taken them a while to get the training in place and to.
Mr. Chop, Comptroller DeGaro,
It's okay.
thank you for being here with us today. Thank you,
I yield.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. The gentlelady from Virginia has the floor.
Last year I was diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, or PS. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As some of you may know, last year I was diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, or PSP. I described it as Parkinson's on steroids, and I don't recommend it. PSP makes it very difficult for me to speak. So I use an assistive app so that I can participate and you can understand me. I want to thank the chair and ranking member for allowing me to do both today. I appreciate the work the GAO is doing to bolster your work, both on national security and technology. As the founder of the Congressional Task Force on Digital Citizenship, I am particularly interested in the intersection of these two areas. Digital citizenship, or the responsible use of technology, applies to anyone who uses computers, the internet, mobile phones, or other digital devices to engage with society, and has become an increasingly important topic to me and many of my colleagues in Congress. Of particular interest to me is technology's impact on our children and on the spread of extremism online. As Congress increasingly examines this space, can you elaborate on how the GAO is preparing to ensure your workforce is prepared to address these areas and help educate members about how tech companies and platforms operate?
Yes, please. First, I was sorry to learn about your health diagnosis, but I admire your courage and your flexibility. With regard, we've expanded our science and technology assessments and analytics group from 49 people a few years ago. We have 175 people we'll have in place by the end of this year. A lot of people with skills in these areas. We have developed a framework for auditing artificial intelligence algorithms to make sure they're free of bias and they operate as intended. Since 2013, I've been urging the Congress to pass a privacy framework for social media and the sharing of information, and also to provide more flexibilities to the government agencies to make sure that the privacy and people understand how their information that they enter into many applications is being used, and they have a little bit more of a say in it. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. I'm hopeful with the current efforts of the Congress to focus on artificial intelligence to try to get ahead of that a little bit. So we're doing a lot. We're doing work now on the cost and benefits and risk of generative AI. And so we're going to continue to focus on these issues. I mean, it's a very important subject. We're going to provide a lot of technical assistance to the Congress and look at how, like we looked at how artificial intelligence could be used for expediting drug development, helping in diagnosis and treatment in the medical area. We did that in partnership with the National Institute of Medicine. We're looking at applications in many other areas. I think more education has to be provided to our children. And in technology, unlike a lot of other areas where they get some advice from their parents, I think not all the parents are prepared to give that same level of support in the technology area. In some cases, they're learning from their children as opposed to the traditional way that it goes. I'm a grandfather of nine grandchildren, and I see how it's become ubiquitous to them. Yeah. And so I think that's a very important issue. And we're willing to work with you on any ideas you have to further expand our work in this very important area. It's important to the economy and our competitiveness, but all technology has a dark side to it. And what we're trying to do is to highlight what some of those risks are. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, I've long been concerned about security issues and computer security, and we're still not doing a good job in that area as a government.
Thank you, ma'am. The chair now recognizes Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Dodaro. Actually, my questioning follows along with Ms. Wexton's. I'm on the Speaker's AI task force, and we now are grappling with this big challenge of how do we take this transformational opportunity that we have that AI is going to present, and what's Congress's role in providing the right guidelines, the guardrails to protect society, but also not provide so much, overburdensome regulation that we stifle innovation.
Right.
But particularly, in listening to your 5 key focus areas, national security, fraud, science and technology, healthcare, cybersecurity, every single one of those come up in meetings that we're having about AI and where this is going. And as you had mentioned, there's a dark side, but there's also tremendous opportunity. So one, you're going to have your agency is going to have the need to be monitoring others outside and how they're using it, but also I'm interested in how you as the GAO are going to be harnessing AI to bring that to bear to assist you. But what how can we help? How can Congress help you, provide you with the tools, the guidelines you need? Are there any authorities you need, or where do you see that? How are you using it to this point? I know you're talking about doing risk assessments and things like that, but tangibly, are you using our AI tools now, and where do you see that going?
Yes, I set up an innovation lab with GAO so we could test things out, before we apply them, more broadly. We've used a large language model, and what we're going to start with is inputting. We've issued thousands of reports on all different topics, and to do a search now involves a lot of manual intervention. So we're going to try to see if we can use the large language model and artificial intelligence to distill down these hundreds and thousands of GAO reports on particular topics to expedite our searches. And then once we're comfortable with the information, to allow Congress to use it to be able to search GAO products. And, we started with our own work because I know it's accurate. Part of the problem here in the other cases is if you don't get good information.
Gotta have clean data to
Yeah,
start with.
yeah, and this is a problem because a lot of our reports talk about the poor quality of government data, and it doesn't have good integrity and reliability and good quality into it. So we're doing that. We're also using it to see if we can use it to do some editing on our reports and things of that nature, and using it, in a number of other areas. So we're dedicating some time to come up with some concrete products of how we can use it with GAO. That's the prime example right now.
So are you, just want to touch on the data there. Are you finding any common themes? Are there areas are there ways as we start establishing standards for how we operate? Are there things we can do on the front end to start establishing standards for how that data is created so that these AI models can be used more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I've made recommendations. Let's take usaspending.gov, for example, which supposed to provide all the information on how the government spends its money, all right? We've continued to find gaps. We found 49 agencies weren't reporting at all. Several $1 billion weren't even included. The data's not complete, reliable. I worked with the Congress before. There are data standards that are set, but there's no data governance structure in place to enforce it within the executive branch. We've made many recommendations to the Treasury Department and OMB to have a more structured, stringent data standards, data governance structure in place. Also, the requirement for the inspector generals in the agencies to audit the information to ensure its accuracy expired. And they're not going to go in and audit it unless Congress directs them to do it. So I've recommended to the Congress that they reinstate the requirement to have periodic reviews of the inspectors general in order to make sure that quality of that data is much more accurate. We spend, in a number of cases, a lot of time looking at the reliability of information when we do individual audits to make sure it's reliable before we, use it to draw conclusions and findings and recommendations. That shouldn't be the case. I mean, there should be much more integrity into the federal government's information in that area. So that's one glaring example. And, but it's a problem because I think it's going to limit the federal government to be able to use the potential of AI without causing distorted effects that are going to happen. That's why also we created this framework for how to audit artificial intelligence, and part of it is how do you ensure that the data is right? How do you have an oversight function in place? Because if it's not done properly, all we're going to do is get bad data faster.
Right.
And that's not going to
Draw wrong conclusions faster.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. It's going to cause a lot of problems. So there are many things that could be done now. I'll be happy to provide the committee with a list of all our recommendations in this regard. But if you don't have that foundation, it's going to limit the government's ability to do it. And the government needs to ensure that when you're looking at regulatory aspects, that we set that same standard for the private sector, and that they ensure the integrity of their information, that it's transparent and it's tested properly before the applications are made public.
I appreciate that, and I would love to get those recommendations that you have and work with you.
Sure, absolutely. And we have we've got a great chief scientist in GAO and a chief data scientist. And so maybe they can meet with your task force, and I'd be happy to as well.
I appreciate that.
Sure, absolutely.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, Mr. Controller General, so we're going to appoint a subcommittee of two. One is Mr. Franklin, who will be the chair, and then one with whoever Mr. Espaillat wants to put on the committee with him to provide recommendations back to us, both on coordinating with House admin to get that front and center for their consideration and also ours for the purposes of writing our report. And so the deadline for your subcommittee and getting back with the subcommittee is, let's say, 45 days? Not yet, but thank you for asking in such a formal manner.
Yeah. No,
That's okay, because we'll pick on Mr. Letourneau in his absence, and it'll be much worse than anything you got.
We'd be happy to help and assist you in that regard. I also want to thank Congresswoman Bryce for the Subcommittee on Modernization and the House Administration Committee for setting up space in the Longworth building. We showed up the first day we can get in. It's working well, and I'm hopeful that that'll continue to do that as well. To reach more members, individual member offices, in addition to the committees that we work with.
Okay, great. We're going to go now to Mr. Halpern from the Government Publishing Office. I would ask you, General DeDeo, to hang around in case members want to talk to you afterwards. When we get done with all three of you, if there are any questions taking part of the gentleman from Illinois' recommendation, we try to accommodate as much as possible. We'll have questions, any follow-up questions for all three of you at the end. So, Mr. Halpern, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Espaillat, members of the subcommittee. It is great to be here. It is great to see you again. And let me first say thank you so much for your support for the work that our 1,600 craftspeople and professionals at GPO do for Congress. I'm pleased to appear today to testify in favor of our FY25 appropriations request. In the interest of time, I'll do my best to keep this short. As many of you know, GPO is fundamentally a manufacturing operation. We publish, produce, and maintain materials for all three branches of government, and we operate much as a business would. Only about 10% of the agency's operating budget is directly appropriated, and most of that is to cover the direct cost of Congress's own printing and publishing and the operation of the Federal Depository Library Program. We recover the rest of our $1.3 billion operating budget directly from our customers. This year, we're requesting approximately $136 million, and that includes $83 million for Congressional publishing, nearly $42 million for our public information programs, including the Federal Depository Library Program, and about $11.5 million for special projects funded by our revolving fund. This represents a 3.1% increase over last year's enacted levels and basically reflects our increases in labor and materials costs. Fully funding our request will allow us to continue recruiting the next generation of GPO teammates and, importantly, fund our ongoing modernization efforts, such as developing XPub, which is our next generation composition engine, and adopting digital printing technologies. Likewise, it will enable us to expand the depth and breadth of our digital offerings, like congressionally mandated reports in the Congressional serial set. Thank you again for your support of GPO, supporting this committee, and really all of Congress is one of our top priorities. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ranking Member, the floor is yours.
Can you briefly discuss how your recent modernization efforts have increased your reach to the American public?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we try to do is make sure that the information that our customers produce, and it ultimately is their information, it's Congress's information or it's the courts or whoever our customer may be, we want to make sure that that information is available in as many different formats as possible so that it's readable and accessible by folks. So we do that through a whole variety of different ways. One of those is trying to update the data standards for Congress itself so that we can provide your bills in a variety of different formats, not just PDF, but structured data as well. Similarly, we are going back through our archives and trying to make old documents available on govinfo.gov, the world's only ISO-certified trusted digital repository. So we've just completed digitization of the Congressional serial set, and we finished statutes at large, right? Yeah, we finished our work on statutes at large, so going all the way back to 1789. So we're trying to make all of that available, and again, and try and do it in as many different formats as we can, so it is as accessible as it can be for folks, whether they're looking at a PDF or whether they are looking for more of a structured data or something that's more compatible with and easier to read. So we're trying to achieve that on all of the different levels that we can.
If a tax-paying citizen that doesn't have English proficiency wants to access some basic information, is there anything available in other languages?
So it depends. We don't do direct translation ourselves, but sort of piggybacking off of this discussion of AI and some of the other tools that are out there, the more that we can get into sort of fundamental readable data formats, there are going to be other tools out there that can do the translation pretty easily, whether it's Google Translate or some other product. So my goal is always to try and make that basic data available where I can. Sometimes with old documents, it's really hard to do without having a human being sit there and rekey it.
But with the new technologies, that may be
absolutely. So let me give you an example. I talked about XPub, our new composition engine. Right now, that's in user acceptance testing with the House and Senate for bills, resolutions, and amendments. So ultimately, it's up to our customer when that rolls out, but my hope is we would see that late summer, early fall. And one of the immediate changes that you will find is instead of the, quite frankly, really terrible text-only display that you would get now on congress.gov or govinfo, that will go to a full HTML5, fully compliant, fully structured data format, so it's much easier for these tools to translate that into other languages, as opposed to the way it currently displays. So that's our goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Clyde.
Thank you. In your testimony, you mentioned that only 10% of your budget is appropriated, and that there is about a 3% increase, so about $4 million of appropriated money. By the way, I think a tremendous amount of what you guys do. I think you're a top-tier agency, and I'm happy that you run it as well as you do. All right. So could you tell me this additional $4 million? I mean, you mentioned here it incorporates increased costs in labor and materials. Can you be a little more specific about what that $4 million increase entails?
Sure. So let me start with labor costs, because that's frankly, the largest component of that. So Right now, we've got, depending on how you count, someplace between 12 and 13 union bargaining units. So we've got contracts in place with those bargaining units. Our agreement with them is that that they'll receive the same increase that a standard GS employee would receive. So if federal employees receive a 3% increase, they've got that 3% increase. Last year, that was, I want to say it was 5%. So we've got to factor that into our costs. And the other thing to preface this all with is, by law, I'm required to recover my costs. So the way we interpret that is, if it costs us X to produce Congress's documents, that's where we've got to recover that. We can't go to another agency and recover the cost to produce Congress's thing from what they're paying us.
Right, right.
There is sharing of shared overhead costs, but for instance, we're not going to surcharge the State Department for our production of passports to fund what Congress needs to fund. Okay. So you take that, you add in the costs of paper, and frankly, we need people. We need to add on folks to meet the requirements that you all place on us. So, give you an idea. Our workforce trends older than the federal average. So, and one key area is in the pre-press work, and that's where human beings will, you drop a bill into the hopper, there's a human being who looks at that paper to make sure that it matches the electronic file that we have. And those folks are getting older, and they're getting ready to retire, and we need to hire the next generation of folks to come, learn from them, and follow behind. So those are all resources that we need to bring to bear. We think keeping those costs to around 3%, given where we are, we're able to offset, frankly, much higher costs by investing in technology and trying to become more efficient. Our ability to keep doing that at a zero increase disappeared a few years ago, but that's our goal, is to keep that number as low as we possibly can.
Okay, well, on that note of hiring people, a question I'd like to ask both you and that I did not ask the good general down there. What percentage of your workforce is working completely, has returned to the office and is working completely in person, and what percentage is remote? And if you can answer that, and then follow on with that.
So about 2/3 of our teammates have come to the office throughout. They are craftspeople and manufacturing employees, and you can't take a printing press home.
Right.
The third of our team that is knowledge workers, telework has worked really, really well for us. And those folks are either largely telework or some sort of hybrid arrangement. What we did, I'll give you one example. We used to have 12 sales offices all across the country, and that was to serve those agencies wherever they were. Nobody came to visit them. So when we shifted to telework, we found that those folks could keep doing their job just as they were before, and we didn't need that overhead. So we closed all 12 of those offices and saved about $1 million a year in rent and other overhead costs. So yes, we've embraced telework, but we've also found some savings from being able to do that.
Okay. So 2/3, 1/3?
2/3, 1/3.
All right.
Yeah. We've had a robust telework program for over 20 years in GAO. It really started during 2001 when there were anthrax attacks at the Capitol. And all the House of Representatives, all 435 members, their staff, and the committee staff came to the GAO building to continue their work because they had to deal with the emergencies associated
I bet
with
that was fun.
It was interesting. I was sitting in my office on a Friday, I got a call from, and I said, well, when do you want to come? They said, Monday. I said, well, give me till Tuesday at least. And so we did, but they were there for 2.5 weeks and dealing with the aviation industry and all the problems that came from 9/11. And we said, well, so we let people work from home. We increased our technical capacity. And we're a knowledge-based organization. Most of the government's records are now digitized. We have 11 field offices across the country. Most of the federal money is spent outside of Washington, and most federal employees are outside there. So it's very important for our people to go. I'm more interested in where they go to do the audit work, whether it's a VA medical center, a military installation, a state agency that's running the Medicaid program, for example. So our people need to be out. We've had in the last year like 3,200 trips where we've sent people to every state, all 4 territories, and 36 different countries around the world, you know, and where U.S. interests are there. So this program, even before the pandemic, our people could work 66 hours out of 80 hours every 2 weeks, telework. And so we're adding a remote component. Well, I've done evaluations all along, very strict evaluations to make sure it doesn't affect the quality of our work and the integrity of our operations to the Congress. So our people have flexibility. It helps us attract really high caliber talent, you know, and so that we have the best people to serve the Congress and produce these reports that we do. So it's helped us retain people. Our attrition rate's less than 6%, and we're able to get people from the private sector that we couldn't get without flexible work arrangements, because we can't compete on salaries. I mean, it's just flat out. And these scientists I've been hiring, these are people who want flexibility, and we've been able to attract, you know, high caliber people. So, you know, and I believe it's, over the years, it's not had any effect on our quality and our productivity of our work. You know, I've been in GAO over 50 years, so I've seen all different kind of work arrangements, and I'm very proud of the quality of the work that we have now. And it's because we have high caliber people, and having flexible work arrangements is pivotal to bringing those people in and keeping them.
Thank you, that's good to hear. I yield back.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Thanks, Chair. In the darkness, a little bit of light here, congressionally mandated reports. As you know, we create hundreds and hundreds, Carl Sagan-like number requests for congressionally mandated reports. For the most part, before they ended up on the bookshelf, dusty. A lot of them had critical information, but a lot of them involved access into what the government was doing and why it mattered. So I was involved with that, but it had great bipartisan support, Transparency Caucus. So now we're a year into this. There are 250 reports on the website, your website.
Actually, I can give you an updated number. So
As of this
Monday,
morning.
as of Monday, we had 299 reports online from 61 different agencies.
So I guess the short question is just tell us a little bit about that process. Are there any agencies that we need to talk to who aren't as helpful? And
I can get you a list of folks who may be, I think the polite way to put it might be a little laggard in
I'm from
adopting
Chicago.
this.
We can visit them.
Our phrase, not yours. You need a tune-up?
However you'd like to deal with the issue.
And does the public know about this?
We do a lot of outreach to executive branch agencies, trying to educate them about their requirements under the law. And we have done our level best to make this process as easy as we possibly can. Right now, the vast majority of those documents are coming to us as PDFs. We would like to, in the future, help build systems for these agencies so that they can deliver these documents to us in other more accessible formats as well. But we've been very pleased with the success so far. We were able to essentially stand the program up in a year, and we used a combination of custom and commercial off-the-shelf technology to make that happen. And we're very proud of the results.
And again, I want to make sure that we do what we can to make sure the public is aware of this, so they can go fishing here to see what information might help them.
We highlight this on govinfo.gov, and we are happy to shout from the mountaintops about the availability of this new resource.
Thank you. I appreciate all your work on that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Halpern, thank you for being with us this morning. Tomorrow, the House Administration Subcommittee will be on modernization. We'll be marking up H.R. 7592 to remove the print requirement for the annotated Constitution and pocket part supplements. If you all have not seen a published annotated Constitution, it is about 5 inches in height and is done on a decade basis. But that tends to actually be out of date fairly quickly. And we recognized in the Modernization Subcommittee that by allowing that to be done online, it is much more up to date, it is much more convenient. Director, can you talk a little bit about how much savings that we will achieve by moving that to strictly online?
Sure. I believe the cost to produce the last edition was about $500,000. That was a substantial savings over the time before, when it was up over $1 million. I think one thing to keep in mind is there are some customers out there for the actual book, and those are our federal depository libraries. So there may be some disappointment there that it's not available. But yeah.
Some of us, and thank you for being gentle with how you describe age of employees. Some of us really like books. Please continue.
I like books, I like stationery, so this seems to be the right fit for me. So there's probably going to be a little bit of disappointment in that community. That said, the FDLP program is moving to a largely digital program anyway. Libraries don't have space to store these volumes, and we have been working really closely with that cohort to try and soften the blow, not just on Conan, on the Constitution annotated, but on other documents as well, and creating places for physical copies on a regional basis rather than necessarily every library. And there are ways, if folks really decide in the future that they want a printed copy. Digital inkjet technology gives us a lot more flexibility than we had back in the offset days. So it will become cheaper still. So if we wanted to, say, run softcover copies, a limited run, that's easy enough for us to do.
I appreciate that. I think the focus for us is trying to find ways to utilize technology in a beneficial way, and certainly that Conan book, albeit is quite lovely and large, it's also almost immediately outdated once it is published. So by using technology to keep that information up to date, I think is incredibly important for anyone that's using it for actual legal purposes. So thank you for entertaining that. I look forward to marking that up tomorrow. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Ms. Weston, the floor is yours for questions for the GPO director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Halpern, thank you for being here. It's good to see you again. When you came before us last year, you invited us to come to the GPO facility a short walk from here on North Capitol Street. It was fascinating to see the quantity and quality of publications that are printed here and distributed nationwide. The little notepads that you make with leftover scrap paper and decorated with ancient techniques were very well received. Last year we spoke about a number of initiatives to modernize Congress.gov and the ways we print and review congressional documents. Coming from the Virginia, techniques were very well received. Coming from the Virginia State Legislature, where we at LIS, the opaque nature of bill text is a pet peeve of mine, and I appreciated your insights. One of the things you mentioned in that conversation, and in your opening testimony today, is the work GPO is doing to further develop the XPub system in GovInfo. I see that your budget request includes nearly $6 million for XPub development and over $5.4 million for GovInfo. Can you please elaborate on how these investments will further the work you have done in the last year and what, if any, additional functionality will be achieved? Dr. Swagel, it's wonderful to have you here.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for the opportunity to answer those questions, and thank you for coming to visit. It was great having you. Let me take it.
Swagel,
Let me take
it's wonderful
XPub.
to have you here.
Let me take XPub first. As I mentioned, that right now is in user acceptance testing with both the House and the Senate. So our hope is either over the summer or in the fall, Ledge Council, both House and Senate, will give that product their okay and sort of flip the switch and start using that. The immediate change that folks will see is that the text, the plain text display of a bill, resolution, or amendment will be far more readable online than they are currently. And that's a huge step forward. What XPub holds for the future is the ability to reimagine what congressional documents look like. So one project I'm working on with the blessing of the Joint Committee on Printing and both House Administration and Senate rules is updating the format for committee reports. So we've done some focus groups with institutional officers and committees so far. We've taken that information back, and I'm working with our graphic designers now to incorporate a lot of that feedback to come up with a new format for committee reports. On GovInfo, we are always trying to expand those collections. And we are trying to figure out new ways to incorporate new technology to increase the value that GovInfo delivers for the American public. And I know that we've talked with Mrs. Bice and other folks about the opportunities for AI and how that could change things. And one of the things we're struggling with on GovInfo is while we could create a sort of large language model search engine to search all of government publications from 1789 forward, we're a little concerned because GPO's brand is we are delivering you the authentic document. And if we have something that interposes between the user and that authentic document, is that really delivering the authentic item that we've been advertising? So those are some of the kinds of issues we are struggling with. But we are very open to figuring out new ways to deliver this information in ways that benefit your individual constituents and the public at large here in the U.S. and really worldwide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Halpern. I was thinking back to last year, we were talking about workforce, and we had the questions about remote working, and one of the challenges you had expressed is in some of the skills, particular skills necessary within your office, some of these are just things that people don't learn until they get there, and there's a lot of hands-on. You talked about reinstating your apprenticeship program, and I'm just interested to hear how that's progressed and where it needs to go from here.
So that first year, well, let me back up. We've got some critical needs in frankly all of our trades, but particularly in the proofreading copywriting area, and that's actually the entry point for congressional documents. So our first apprentice class was, I believe, 8 folks, and and they are in the second year of their program right now. And we are hoping to get them out on the floor and actually doing work a little bit sooner than we had in the past. We also, this past year, did a new apprenticeship class of almost 24 folks. I believe it's another eight proofreaders, and then a mix of press people, plate makers, and other trades that we need for GPO. So we've really invigorated that program, and we're very happy with the results. We also took on another program really directed at our efforts to produce the U.S. passport. So there, instead of doing a full-on apprentice program, we did an on-the-job training program. So we looked for folks who have some aptitude in a manufacturing environment. We used objective assessments to try and ferret that out. And then we have a 3-year on-the-job training program where these folks that we bring in, as we call them production technicians, they learn all of the machines that they need to learn to produce U.S. passports and secure identification cards. And at the end of that 3 years, they are a full journey person bookbinder at the end. That has been a tremendously successful program. We run that both here in D.C. and at our facility down in Mississippi, where we do our secure ID work. And I want to say, Steve, what, about 80 folks in the production tech? Yeah, we've hired about 80 folks in the production tech program. So these kinds of programs where we're teaching a trade, where we're teaching folks how to make the products that our customers are asking for have actually been really, really successful. We've also had great experience recruiting into our recent grad program. And those are folks from everybody from accountants to IT specialists to automation experts. And they're in a cohort that is learning as they're going, learning what we do at GPO, and really bringing a lot to the table. So it's been a great, we've hired, last year we hired almost 200 new people. And that's hugely important as our workforce ages, and a lot of them are taking their well-deserved retirements. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that we're ready so that as folks retire, we've got that next generation coming up.
Yeah, I'd seem to recall you mentioned about maybe half of your workforce leaving the next 3 to 4 years. So do you feel like you're on step to?
We do.
Stay man.
We do. The statistic is half of them will be eligible to retire in the next 4 years. That doesn't mean they all will, but we are working really hard to make sure we're backfilling. We've got some other areas, for instance, that proof room. In that we have a mean age in the proof room. The mean age there is 59, and over half of them are eligible to retire right now. So we've got a shortage of folks doing that work. That's why sometimes it takes us a little longer to process your introduced bill than we'd like. We've got a plan to supplement that using reemployed retirees, new apprentices, and trying to hire folks as well. We think in a couple of years we'll be back up to full staff in that area, but it's going to take us some time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Dr. Swagel for CBO, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Amedee, Ranking Member Espiat, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Congressional Budget Office's budget request. Thank you for providing nearly the full amount we requested for this fiscal year, and more broadly for your continued support of our agency. CBO is requesting an appropriation of $73.5 million for 2025, which is an increase of $3.5 million, or 5%, from the amount provided in 2024. The request would address increased costs, sustain our investments in IT infrastructure, and enable CBO to add staff in key areas. Our mission is to provide nonpartisan analysis to the Congress that is timely, rigorous, and transparent. When legislation is heading to a vote, we provide cost estimates and real-time analysis of amendments, often hundreds or even thousands of them for bills such as the NDAA. We provide analysis and technical assistance for large, complex legislation, such as reauthorization of the Farm Bill, that we're still working on that. We produce budget and economic projections and analysis of a broad range of policy issues confronting the Congress. The additional resources would enable us to do better, even better, in terms of our responsiveness and our transparency. Our fiscal year 2024 funding will allow CBO to grow from 267 in late March to 276 people by the end of the year. Then our request for 2025 would help us grow by an additional 9 more, so that's to 285. CBO would add analysts in areas of particular congressional focus, defense and homeland security. In particular, I want to add people for some of our work on the budget impacts of weapon systems. We'd add people to do implications of fiscal policy, so effects of taxes and spending on the economy, and our long-term projections, and that's analysis of Medicare, of Social Security, and preventive health policy. Our requested increase is entirely for personnel expenses. It's to cover the salaries and benefits for current employees and to a much lesser extent to fund these new staff. Our total non-personnel expenses would decline by about 3% because some of our spending for IT in 2024, such as purchases of equipment, cybersecurity, cloud services, are for things that we deferred last year and that will not recur in the future. Will not recur in 2025. They will recur at some point in the future. Our requested budget would support our goal and our mission to provide information when it is most useful to the Congress. And for the Appropriations Committees, we provide real-time provision by provision estimates of the 12 annual appropriation bills and any supplemental appropriation bills or continuing resolutions. And we respond to thousands of requests for technical assistance and more as you craft your legislation. In addition to providing cost estimates before a floor vote for nearly all bills, we will publish dozens of statutory reports, requested reports on topics, on a wide range of topics, the budgetary impacts of coverage for obesity or anti-obesity medications, hepatitis C treatment, housing, Navy shipbuilding, much more. We'll offer help by phone, by video, by email, in person to your offices as you consider and draft legislation and in response to questions. So in summary, to achieve our goal of being as responsive as possible, CBO requests an increase of $3.5 million. With your support, we look forward to continuing to provide timely and high-quality analysis to the Congress. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ranking Member, thank you,
Your agency does provide great work and bipartisan work, and I commend you for your efforts. In fiscal year 2024, the Appropriations Act that this subcommittee was able to provide, CBO did with one of the largest percentage increases of any agency across government. And this increase was in recognition to the important role that you play, obviously, in strengthening Congress' power of the purse through analysis and services that you provide. As we begin fiscal year 2025 and its appropriations process, I want to ask you about CBO's prudent budget planning for next year. And regarding your budget summary that noted that CBO postponed filling about 12 vacancies during fiscal year 2024 CR, right? And if necessary, will CBO be prepared to continue operating at the fiscal year 2024 level in October if there is a continuing resolution for some part of next year? And could you tell us the impact that on the volume of your work that having continuing resolutions imposes on you?
Yes, sir. And we're looking ahead in exactly the way that you're talking about. We're expanding now. As soon as the second appropriations bill was enacted, we posted a number of job openings in key areas. Our work on Medicare in particular and other health issues is something that we had attrition, and now we're looking to restaff and rebuild. We're going to be cautious and recognize that there could well be a CR from October on until sometime into the next year, and so we're not going to, in some sense, overhire in a way that would put us at risk if there is a CR. So we'll expand with our
So how
additional
does
funding.
the CR impact you? Does it make you hire more people or less people?
We would be cautious and not fill all of our positions. We'll get the critical ones first, healthcare and national security first, but it would impact us. And the CR this year, I lost people working on Medicare, and the volume of our work on Medicare is intense and immense and intense, I guess. And so it would impact us. We're continuing it as a CR.
Okay. And so you also do all types of reports, and obviously you analyze our bills and the impacts that they have. So the work that you do is not confined to this budgetary process, correct? And so how can you increase your response time in other areas by hiring people, even though we're doing CRs or other things that may not require as many people as possible?
Yeah, and we will do that. So the foundation of much of our work is our economic forecast, what's happening in the macroeconomy, and having a projection for, say, the unemployment rate in the future that feeds into our analysis of, say, SNAP benefits or school lunches, things like that, and inflation and all that. So we also lost people on our macroeconomic team that we're looking to rebuild. So that's an area that's outside the cost estimates, but that supports everything we do.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Swigel. I appreciate the conversation that we had prior, walking through some of the numbers that you provided us as far as those increases in the budget request. Can you talk a little bit about the what types of analyses that you provide for appropriations bills? Being an appropriator, that's something that I certainly take notice of.
Yeah. So with the appropriators, we are in some sense just real-time back and forth. We're providing analysis provision by provision, and then looking at the whole to make sure that each subcommittee is within its allocation. So in some sense, we start with the top line and then work with you from the bottom up. With the two appropriations bills that were enacted this year, it's the Consolidated Appropriations Act and the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act. We were, I had to write that down.
I was going to say, we're creative with names, aren't we?
Right.
Yeah.
We were just in some sense in real-time communication with the committee in both, again, at the top and working up. And so that's how we were able to post the cost estimates for both of those bills more than a day before the floor vote. When the final bill came out, of course, we checked the language, made sure it matched our previous estimates. But we were ready because of that close cooperative working relationship.
Fantastic. Are there any restrictions on CBO that prevent it from including supplementary information regarding projected debt servicing cost in the cost estimates for legislation that impacts the deficit?
No, so we're set up to do that. In fact, on our website, we provide a tool, a spreadsheet, that uses our latest economic projection and lets someone say, what are the interest costs of anything? So, so we make that available. We don't put that into our cost estimates, but that's something we would work with the budget committees, in both chambers. And if it's something that's useful to them and to members, we certainly would work with them and follow their direction.
And finally, when we spoke previously, you indicated that there was an increase in IT costs, that you were trying to make some upgrades across the agency. Can you also talk a little bit about software? Because that's such a big piece of what you all utilize to be able to provide estimates. Maybe walk through a little bit of what that software increase looks like and why that's important for you all to continue to invest in that.
Okay, no, thank you. And in some sense, we've been shifting to the cloud, just like the other two agencies. And in some sense, we're moving from hardware, some things that were hardware to software. So I have a PC on my desk. Most of the work gets done in the cloud.
Well, let me clarify. I meant from a forecasting perspective, the software that you're using for forecasting that you're having to continually sort of modify and update,
very
and
good.
the
Okay.
cost associated with that.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah. We've been doing a variety of things. I'll give you one example that you and I have talked about before, is we have one key model that does our analysis on Social Security, which was built in Fortran 77, which I actually learned when I was in high school, but I don't think anyone is learning that today. So we're shifting that to Python, which is essentially the language someone would learn. Now, we're actually using, that's the one use we have so far of an AI tool, is that you can put blocks of code into AI tools. Here's the Fortran, it'll translate into Python. We then have to check it. But that's one. We have other macroeconomic tools is a key area that we're upgrading. And then the last one I'll mention is on the healthcare side, we work with massive data sets, various healthcare data sets. We have a secure network, is like a subset of our network is secure. And we've been trying to upgrade basically the ability to make that model work faster. And it's both on the hardware side and the software side.
Great. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I referenced it earlier. Here is a actual physical copy of the Conan from the publishing office. I thought people may want to see it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Well, first of all, Ms. Bice, I want to say you got a pretty good eye. You said it was about 5 inches thick. I'm guessing maybe 4.5, but that's close enough for government work. And so since we're going to digress for just a second before we go to Ms. Wexton, are those for sale?
They are through our online bookstore. I couldn't tell you the price off the top of my head. Do you know? $236. $236, and that can be yours.
Will you put my name on it too if I pay extra?
If you ask nicely, I can arrange that.
Okay. Well, for anybody who, it's cheaper than a doorstop made out of silver these days, so what the heck, that's probably a pretty good price. With that, Ms. Wexton, the floor is yours.
To get my questions together. Maybe one more minute to get my questions together, and then you can just move on and come back to me later.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Espaillat asked the questions I had about, staffing and personnel as far as, how our wacky budgeting process has evolved. And Ms. Bice talked about my technology questions. So really, I guess as tail end, Charlie, just ask it, is there anything here else that you'd like to share with us, things that we should be drilling into that we haven't been asking you about, or any parting shots?
That's a loaded question, so you can go any direction you
A
want.
lot of different ways.
No, there's lots of ways I could go. We're here to support you, and that's my goal, is to look ahead, and wherever you are going, I want to get there first. And so that's some of the work we're doing on preventive healthcare, is that we know members are interested. I mentioned the anti-obesity medication. I've had many members ask about that. We're really hard at work on that. The Hep C has a little bit of that same flavor. Spend money up front, and if it works well, prevent illness and costs down the road. The math is tough on that. It's a little bit like saving money at Costco by spending a lot, sort of buying a lot. So the math doesn't always work, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm sorry, that's my mother, my late stepfather, that's how they thought. That's what I'm trying to do, is get ahead and figure out, and that's some of the hiring that we're doing is basically the areas. Healthcare and national security are the two areas where the interest in our work is just just continues to grow, and I want to be ready for it.
Well, thank you for that, and it's got to be for you a fascinating job for one who likes numbers, but the diversity of the issues that you're working on, flight hours for F-18 pilots and
Yep.
healthcare, challenges on drugs coming down the line, but I appreciate all that you do, and all of you gentlemen, thank you very much for very well-run organizations, and it's a privilege to work with you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Ranking Member, do you have anything else for these three gentlemen?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm done.
Okay. So a little bit of housekeeping for the three of you. Oh, Ms. Wexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Swagel, it's wonderful to have you here with us today. I always enjoy seeing you and your passion for your work. As you mentioned in your testimony, operating under a continuing resolution has presented a number of challenges for CBO, causing the agency to shrink from 279 to 267 employees. Your budget request for the coming year will help account for these losses and restore the agency to 285 employees, which will help you meet your Congressional Budget Act responsibilities and be more responsive to Congress. Was CBO able to get down to the required number of eligible through attrition, or did they have to let people go?
So we were able to lose people through attrition and stay within our budget. And the challenge was that some of the people we left created holes in important areas. And I mentioned Medicare before. That was really a tough one just because of the queue of work. And so we're still catching up. But if you look at our website now, we have several job openings posted that would support that work.
Thank you very much.
In previous years, we have discussed the importance of child care to attracting and retaining the best and the brightest to your workforce. I was glad to see that CBO is requesting the authority and funding to provide a child care benefit in this year's request. Can you please elaborate on why you need this benefit as a way sweetener to get qualified professionals to work for the CBO, and the impact this will have on your ability to recruit and retain the employees you need to be responsive to Congress?
No, thank you very much for asking that. It's a key issue for CBO and for our staff, our current staff and our future staff. Just that the age of our staff is slightly different than, kind of overall house staff. We tend to hire people, either right out of college. We have maybe 30 of those. We're hiring them now. But really, it's out of graduate school, after a master's. And people of that vintage, that age, they're getting married and then they're having children a couple years later. We are pretty far down on the priority list for the House Child Care Center, and it means for infants in particular, we just have no hope. So the subsidy that we are looking to provide our employees would allow us to help our employees with especially with infant care, but then more broadly. And it's a critical one. What we're hoping to do is provide a subsidy of $5,000 per employee for 50 employees. And we think that would allow us to essentially help the people with kids in that age range.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you. Any other follow-up questions from members of the committee? Okay, some housekeeping stuff. First of all, I think in order to check the box on the committee record, Mr. Clyde mentioned something. If you could each generate, and this is not what I did with my summer vacation request, just a memo for Ms. Reinschuttle, and I'm going to impose a 2-page limit. And if you want to be shorter than that, that's fine, to just discuss the quality and value with respect to each of your telecommuting folks. I think you have strong stories to tell, but so that if somebody says, hey, what are you doing about that? It's like, well, we discussed that with the agencies that are within our jurisdiction, and they generated short memos, and here they are. So because of that, obviously, none of you gentlemen have any problems with substance. Let's make them hard on substance and light on buzzwords and talking points. You can go to the news talk shows for that stuff. So we'd appreciate that. Also, we would like in fairly real-time manner, I don't think it's something that will require a lot from the publishing office, who is tardy in their reports to you? And let me tell you the context that I'm asking for that information. That is so that the members of this committee, on their other committees that they serve on, other subcommittees and appropriations, if that needs to be a discussion with those agencies, like, hey, what's the problem with reporting blah, 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 we'll endeavor to do it without fingerprints, but I'm sure you can take care of yourself when you're walking to and from work, or if you're going to Costco with Mr. Swegel's relative, or whatever, when you have a town hall meeting on that sort of thing. With respect to members, please feel free. I know I don't need to tell anybody, but if you have other questions that come up, please feel free to engage with the committees directly. But if you would let Ms. Reinschuttle know, so that when we're getting ready to do the work session, that we know that if there are outstanding issues and we can, you know, try to do what we can to resolve that or whatever, that we know what's going on. The final thing I will say is, we are endeavoring to be crisp with the work of this committee, not hasty, not whatever, but we do want to, although no good deed goes unpunished, we were ready a long time ago last round, and of course we went through in the last, what was that euphemism you used, Dr. Swagel, about something appropriations bill?
That is the further
Further,
consolidated.
yeah, that's right, further.
Yep.
That's quite a euphemism, but anyhow. So we want to endeavor to complete the work of the committee for a couple of reasons in a crisp manner, and that is so that members in their other committee assignments frees up time when that comes to do the necessary stuff to that. And then also, in that ever continuing quest to try to do 12 separate bills and in a timely manner, just to be real direct, trying to put the committee in a position to go, hey, folks that schedule the floor, we're ready. We may not agree on everything or whatever, and people, but anyhow, it's like the committee work is done. So there will be plenty of notice. Nobody's going to spring a work session on anybody. I appreciate the fact that there were several competing things today for members, and respect your value judgments on whether you can make it or can't make it. Although, please let Mr. LaTurner know that flying by and dropping off a "you're not in Kansas anymore" note was very effective. We appreciate that. But anyhow, that's kind of the thought as we get started on 25. While the taste or memory, whatever your perspective is, of the 24 process is still fresh in our mind. So thank you all. Thank you, folks, for coming, and we look forward to working with you to get the product finished up. We're adjourned.
It's like